Alright, so this video is going to finish up the rest of the official spoilers that Wizards of the Coast has done up until around Christmas time. There have been some leaks that we'll get to in the next video, so look forward to that. But for now, these are the official spoilers that have been announced at this point. We're going to start with the oldest one, and then we're going to end with the newest one. So first up is Halvar, God of Battle. Now, this is an interesting card because it is a modal card. It is a flip card. So you can choose to either play it as one side or the other. Now, one side is Halvar, God of Battle. This is a 4/4 legendary creature god for 4 mana. It's 2 white and 2 colorless. Creatures you control that are enchanted or equipped have double strike. At the beginning of each combat, you may attach target aura or equipment attached to a creature you control to target creature you control. This card seems bonkers, and I'll get to why in a minute. But first, let's check out the other half. Now, this is Sword of the Realms. This is a 2-drop legendary artifact equipment. It equips for 2 mana. Equipped creature gets +2 attack and has vigilance. Whenever equipped creature dies, return it to its owner's hand. Now, first of all, something that's easily overlooked about this card that I don't think anyone's really paying attention to is the fact that it kind of gets around the legendary rule. Yes, it's legendary. Yes, you can only have one in play at a time. But because there are 2 sides, and each side is a different card that you can choose to play when you're playing the card, if you draw a second copy, it is not a dead card. You simply play it as the other side that you haven't played yet. And this is vastly superior to other legends where you don't have this ability. Normally, if you draw a legendary, you keep it in your hand because you've already got one in play. And a lot of times it can be a dead card. But you don't have that problem with these cards. And that makes it really interesting. I really hope we see more legendary gods that flip, that are equipment on the other side or any kind of other card on the other side, because the utility you can get by having the choice of either, but also the ability to play both halves if you draw a second copy, is really cool. And I think that's where this card shines. Now, looking at Halvar first, his abilities are kind of nutty. The fact that you can move an aura or equipment onto any creature you control at the beginning of every combat is kind of nutty. First of all, being able to move an equipment is crazy because you can attack with something, and then on your opponent's turn, when they declare their combat, you can move the equipment that's on them to one of your other creatures to have a good blocker. And no matter what you're moving, the creature that you're equipping is going to have double strike. So playing Halvar, moving an equipment onto one of your creatures, swinging for a ton of damage, a ton of double strike damage that they can't really block very effectively, and then at the beginning of combat on their turn, moving that same equipment or aura onto Halvar itself and blocking with, a 4/4 double strike at least, plus whatever the equipment's bringing, you could have a 6/4 double strike. Let's take, for example, the Sword of the Realms. If you have both in play, you're attacking with say you have a bear in play, and you attack with Sword of the Realms on it with Halvar in play as well. It's attacking as a 4/2 vigilance double strike, which is by itself nutty. Then you move the Sword of the Realms onto Halvar, and all of a sudden Halvar is now a 6/4 double strike blocker. Like, not only that, but your opponent doesn't know what you're moving things onto before declaring what is attacking. So it's very difficult for your opponent to attack into your board state, not knowing what your board state's going to be, knowing that as soon as they declare their attackers, you can give any one of your creatures double strike, plus whatever the equipment or aura is granting. I mean, having a Demonic Embrace out and being able to move a Demonic Embrace onto any creature you want every combat just seems crazy to me. The fact that you can keep bringing it back, oh man, I don't know. This seems bonkers. I mean, the 4/4 for 4 mana is on rate. You're not losing anything there. And then the plus side of whenever a creature dies, return that creature to owner's hands if the Sword of the Realms was equipping it. Whew. Like, we're not even taking into account creatures with enters the battlefield abilities, where you can get extra value off of replaying those creatures. Make sure whatever creature you're equipping it to doesn't die. It goes back to your hand. It probably has double strikes, so like you're probably taking out a bunch of creatures in the process. It seems like it can be pretty powerful. I could talk about this card all day, but it's going to be interesting to see what decks actually utilize it moving forward. The fact that we have Nahiri in the environment and she focuses on, making equipment better is not lost on me, and I think this card's going to be really, really cool. Moving forward, we have Cerrolf, Realm Eater. Now, a lot of people are thinking this card is really bonkers, but let's go over it first. I don't think it's quite as good as people think, but it is really, really good. This is a 3/3 for 3 mana. It's a legendary creature wolf. Whenever a permanent an opponent controls is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on Cerrolf, Realm Eater. At the beginning of your upkeep, if Cerrolf has one or more +1/+1 counters on it, you may remove all of them. If you do, exile each other non-land permanent with converted mana cost less than or equal to the number of counters removed this way. Now, obviously this is bonkers. It doesn't take out itself. You remove all the counters, you exile all permanents that have that converted mana cost or less, except for Cerrolf. So you get to keep Cerrolf. And that's super powerful. Don't get me wrong. That is incredibly powerful. And this deck, this card is absolutely going to be utilized in certain decks. But it doesn't really do anything the turn it comes into play. And that's what you need to really pay attention to. If you play this out on turn 3 and your opponent removes it, you get no card advantage, you gain no additional value. And that's not to say that this card still isn't worth running and that this card still isn't super powerful, but I don't think it's the bonkers card that some people think it is. I think it'll absolutely be utilized in certain decks, especially decks that are high on removal. But I don't think it's going to be quite as broken as people think. I think it just needs to be played around properly. And I think you always have to keep removal open for the chance that they might drop a Cerrolf. Really interesting. It's also overlooked that it can just get really big. You don't have to remove any of the counters to exile anything. You can just keep the counters on it, and it can keep getting bigger. So you can sort of use this as a finisher in a removal-heavy deck where you're just constantly removing their threats and making Cerrolf bigger and bigger and bigger, and keeping it as your closer to end the game. With the fact that it can exile the board as sort of a bonus, a synergistic bonus. It's gravy. Granted, I don't think that's how most people are going to try to use this, but it is a way you could use Cerrolf. Interesting card. It'll be interesting to see what other kind of cards this synergizes with, but it's not super overpowered. Your opponent is most likely going to deal with Cerrolf ASAP and then get on with their life. Moving on to the final card. Now, this was spoiled on Christmas Eve. This card is Tosky, Bearer of Secrets. And I absolutely love this card. This is a 1/1 legendary creature squirrel for 4 mana. It's 1 green and 3. But the spell can't be countered. It's indestructible. And Tosky, Bearer of Secrets attacks each combat if able, but whenever a creature you control, including itself, deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Now, I think this is nutty. I've personally been trying to break the idea of using a bunch of indestructible creatures in a deck with board sweepers to constantly basically wrath only one side of the board and then go to town. So the idea of maybe using Tosky in a deck with other indestructible creatures and Shatter the Sky could be really interesting. The fact that it just doesn't die and all of your creatures gain the ability to make you draw cards when they deal combat damage just seems pretty bonkers. Seems powerful. Granted, it costs a lot. 4 mana for a 1/1 is not on rate at all. But being able to keep this guy alive, it does die to ECD, Elspeth Conquers Death. But man, indestructible, can't be countered, and now your whole team is drawing cards whenever they deal damage to a player. I feel like this card is just waiting to be broken. And I'm going to have a lot of fun trying to really make it viable. Like I said, in a deck with sweepers, with other creatures that are indestructible or have some way to survive being swept. Just seems like a really fun card, and I'm really excited to see where it goes. So anyway, we've got another video coming. There have been a bunch of leaks. They aren't official spoilers, so keep your eyes peeled for that. But for now, give this video a like, share it, and definitely subscribe to the channel because that helps us most of all. And till next time, we'll see you.